In this chapter, we are going to discuss about the nucleus present inside the atom. So we know that uh, electrons are present outside of the in the outside part of the atom, in in the shells or subshells, orbitals. Okay, but there is one very dense and small region at the center of the atom, which is called the nucleus. So nucleus is highly dense and compact region in the atom. Why are we saying highly dense? Because it is a very small region inside the atom, and it consists of most of the mass of the atom. Almost 99.99% of the mass of the atom is inside this nucleus in the form of protons and neutrons. So most of the mass of the atom is concentrated in this nucleus, and because of that and the volume is very small, space is very small. So because of that high mass and low less space, it is very dense and compact. The usual size of the nucleus is it is calculated in Fermi's. Fermi is 10 to the power minus 15 meters. So the usual size comes in a few Fermis. In nucleus we have protons and neutrons, which are in general called nucleons. So nucleons means either proton or either neutron. Now just like we have different levels for electrons, different energy levels for electrons in the form of shells and subshells. Similarly, inside the nucleus as well, we have protons and neutrons in different energy levels inside the nucleus as well. Okay, the protons, neutrons that are present are in some energy levels. Okay, the radius or the size of the nucleus can be obtained by this formula, where R naught is the size of hydrogen nuclei, which is 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 15 meter. A is the mass number and 1 by 3. So R naught multiplied by the cube root of mass number will give us the radius of that particular nucleus. For example, if you want to find the nucleus size of sodium, so at the place of A put 23 and you will be able to find the radius of sodium nucleus. So nucleus is highly compact, highly dense object at the center of the atom, consisting of nucleons, which are proton and neutron. It is in the they are present in different energy levels, and the radius can be obtained or the size can be obtained by this formula. Now let's discuss a few points. Nucleus was first discovered by Rutherford, but what about the particles? So first electron was discovered in 1897 by J.J. Thomson, and proton was discovered even earlier in 1885 by E. Goldstein. But during that time, E. Goldstein did not understand the experiment that he did. So he did not understand that he has discovered proton. So after J.J. Thomson discovered electron, then only proton was confirmed. But it was obviously first observed in 1885, and then neutron took a very long time. In 1932, James Chadwick discovered neutron. Because it is neutral, because of that it took a lot of time to discover it. And the concept of nucleus was introduced by Rutherford in 1911 during his alpha particle experiment. So now what is the reason behind that we needed to find neutron, and why was the neutron discovered? What was the requirement of the neutron? So for example, when electron was discovered, it was evident that proton or positive charge must be there, because overall the atom was neutral. So if the negative charge is there, there must be a positive charge which will make the atom neutral. So because of that, electron helped us in obtaining proton. But then what was the reason behind the discovery of neutron? So there were two main reasons. First was that the mass of the atom was coming out to be half of the actual mass if only protons and electrons mass were considered. So let's say we have some element, let's say we have oxygen. So oxygen has 8 protons and 8 electrons. Remember, a neutron is not yet discovered. So the mass of 8 electron and 8 protons came out to be around 8 U. U is the unit, okay. 1 U equals some kg, okay. 1 U equals approximately 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 27 kg. This is approximate. Okay, so the mass of electron and proton came out to be only 8u, but the mass of oxygen atom was coming out to be twice of that. Oxygen was having mass twice of the mass of electrons and protons. So we only knew about two types of particle, electrons and protons. So they only consisted of about half of the mass of the atom. So where was this remaining half of the mass of the atom was coming? So the scientists proposed that there must be some another particle which must be very heavy around the mass of proton, and which must be neutral, because we already have electron and proton, which makes the atom neutral. So this must be a neutral particle, otherwise the atom will become either positive or negative. So first reason was that the mass of the atom was coming out to be double of the mass of the electrons and protons. So this was one reason, mass defect. Second was the neutrons were also necessary for the stability of nucleus. Why? Because let's say inside, this is nucleus. Remember, usually in this chapter, whenever we are drawing something like a circle, it will be a nucleus. Okay, we will be discussing about this central part. So inside the nucleus there are so many protons. Okay, so these protons must be repelling each other because of the electromagnetic repulsive forces. So these protons must go away from each other and the nucleus must become unstable, but this is not the case. So new force was discovered, strong nuclear force. So there is a force which acts inside the nucleus of the atom, which is called the strong nuclear force. This strong nuclear force acts between the nucleons. Now nucleons means neutrons and protons. So the strong nuclear force is an attractive force. So it allows the protons to remain together and protons and neutrons to remain together because of the attractive force. So this strong nuclear force is stronger than the electromagnetic force, because of which the protons can be together even after the repulsive electromagnetic force. So the neutrons help us in this nuclear force. Strong nuclear force acts between two protons, two neutrons, or between a proton and a neutron. Okay, so the neutrons helps us in the stability of the nucleus. Now one important thing, when the distances are small, then only the strong nuclear force is very much effective. For long or large distances, strong nuclear force does not exist, and because of that, when the size is very small, then strong nuclear force is much greater than the electromagnetic force, and it is attractive in nature. But as the distance increases, the effect of the strong nuclear force vanishes, and at large distances strong nuclear force is way much weaker than the electromagnetic force, or you can say it does not even exist at large distances. So it is to be kept in mind that strong nuclear force is a short range force. Okay, it only acts in the boundary of the nucleus, and that too inside the nucleus only for a small distance. Now remember, strong nuclear force can act between two neutrons, it can also act between neutron and proton, and it can also act between two protons. But the electromagnetic force cannot act between two neutrons or one neutron and one proton. It can only act between two protons, or if we were considering electrons, then electrons also, but as we are talking about the nucleus, we are not discussing about electron. So electromagnetic force only acts between protons, but strong nuclear force acts between neutrons pair, neutron proton, and proton pair. Now this very important formula is to be discussed now, mass energy equivalence. This mass energy equivalence was given by Albert Einstein in the year 1905. So E equals mc square. This is considered to be one of the most important and famous equation in all of science. So in this equation, E stands for energy, m stands for the mass of the substance, rest mass of the substance, and c is the speed of light in vacuum. So what does this equation say? This equation tells us that the mass of any material can be converted into energy, or energy can be converted into mass. That is, energy and mass are interconvertible into one another. For example, if let's say we have a chalk piece or a duster, so it has some mass. So this mass can be converted into pure energy. Okay, any object having any mass can be converted into pure energy. So the mass is the condensed form of energy. So for example, let's say we have 1 gram object. So how much energy will this 1 gram object will have? So 1 gram means 10 to the power minus 3 kg. So E equal to mc square. Mass is 10 to the power minus 3 kg, and speed of light square 3 into 10 to the power 8 square. So we will get 9 into 10 to the power 13 joule. So this is a huge energy, huge amount of energy is there in only 1 gram of object. So if we can convert the mass into pure energy, we will obtain a lot of energy just by a very small amount of mass. So similarly, if you want to calculate for 1 kg object, then it will come out to be this much joule energy will be there. So this is huge, okay, huge, a lot of energy is there. So this mass energy equivalence tells us that energy and mass are interconvertible into one another. Now let's discuss about the mass defect and the binding energy. So remember that the mass of the proton is this much, again U is the unified mass, and mass of the neutron is this much. So what was happening is that, let's say we are talking about oxygen. So oxygen has 8 protons and 8 neutrons. We will ignore the mass of electron because it is obviously very minute. So oxygen nucleus consists of, and obviously we are only discussing about the nucleus as well, therefore we will not discuss about electron. So it consists of 8 protons, 6, 7, 8 and 8 neutrons. So in oxygen there are 8 neutrons and 8 protons. So what should be the mass? So mass should be quite easy to calculate. It should be 8 into the mass of proton and 8 into the mass of neutron, and then we add them. So this will give us the total mass of oxygen. So once you calculate this, you will get 16.127. So according to our calculation, the mass must be 16.127 U approximately. But what the scientists observed is that when it was calculated, okay, when the mass of this oxygen atom was calculated, then it was observed that only 15.99 U mass was there. So when we mathematically calculate using the protons and neutrons, mass was this, but when we experimentally calculated, the mass came out to be less. So the scientists did not understand what is happening. So this was termed as mass defect. So what is mass defect? Mass defect is the difference in the mathematical mass and the actual mass of the nucleus. Okay, what I am saying is that when we mathematically calculate, the mass was coming more, and when the actual experiment was done and the mass was calculated of the nucleus, then less mass was coming. So this was called the mass defect. So what is actually happening is that when these protons and neutrons come together, then their overall mass reduce, okay, then their overall mass reduce, and that mass reduction is called, that mass that is reduced is called the mass defect. And where does this mass go? So this mass of proton and neutron decrease a little when they come together, and this mass is converted into binding energy. This mass defect is converted into binding energy. How? By this formula, E equals mc square, because mass can be converted into energy. So the binding energy is the energy which helps in binding the nucleons, or it stabilizes the nucleus. Okay, Usually binding energy is calculated in mega electron volt, and mass defect is usually calculated in U, unified mass. So again, when we have any nucleus, then its mass comes out to be less than the individual total mass of the protons and neutrons. It is called the mass defect, and the mass defect or the mass that is reduced is converted into binding energy, which helps the nucleus in being stable, and it helps in combining the having the nucleons together. Now, if any nucleus wants to be stable, then what should be the binding energy per nucleon, high or low? Binding energy per nucleon means the binding energy of each nucleon. Okay, for example, if we have total binding energy in, let's say we are talking about sodium, so sodium has 23 proton plus neutron, and the total binding energy for sodium is, let's say, 46 eV. So what will be the binding energy per nucleon? 46 eV over 23 nucleons. So 2 eV per nucleon. That is, each nucleon will have binding energy of 2 eV. So binding energy per nucleon should be high. Why? Because more the binding energy per nucleon, more stable will be the atom. So if you want more binding energy per nucleon, it means more mass defect. Mass defect should be more, so that we get more binding energy. Now this graph is very important. This graph tells us about the binding energy per nucleon with the mass number. So this is the mass number, and this is the binding energy per nucleon. So what is happening is that, if you notice here, then this mass number, which is initial mass number 0, then 4, 6 something, so these particles, they are comparatively having very less binding energy per nucleon, and also this region also has less binding energy per nucleon as compared to the region which is in between here. So this region has the most binding energy per nucleon. If you look closely, this region has the highest binding energy per nucleon. Okay, highest binding energy per nucleon. So what this means is that the elements in between 30 to 170, they are the most stable elements because they have the highest binding energy per nucleon. As discussed, binding energy should be more, and these particles are less stable because they have less binding energy per nucleon. So this graph tells us that the region having mass number, or the atoms having mass number between 30 to 170 are comparatively more stable. So binding, if in this graph you can see that the binding energy per nucleon is maximum for iron. It is maximum for iron atom, and therefore it is the most stable element. The binding energy per nucleon for iron atom is around 8.75 MeV per nucleon. This is a huge number. And binding energy is high in the atoms having mass number 30 to 170, and binding energy per nucleon is less for the atoms having mass number less than 30 and greater than 170. So when we have more binding energy per nucleon, that means the force of attraction is more. Okay, that is, the nucleus is stable. Now let's say if we have unstable nuclei and we want to make it stable, so how can unstable nuclei become stable? So the unstable nuclei can become stable by following ways. First, by either releasing some energy. Second, heavy nuclei can break into smaller nuclei. Or third, light nuclei can combine to form heavy nuclei. So what am I telling you? First of all, the unstable nuclei can become stable by releasing some excess energy. So now remember, this is not binding energy. As I told you, protons and neutrons also remain in different energy orbits in the nucleus. So if the protons and neutrons are in higher energy state, then they can jump into lower energy state, and the nucleus will become stable. So by releasing some energy in the form of gamma rays, the the nucleus can become stable. Apart from that, we know that the atoms having mass number more than 170 are unstable. So those big nuclei can break into smaller nuclei and get converted into the mass number having less than 170 and more than 30. Let's say it is mass number 56, it is mass number 70. So it will become stable. Uh, and also if we have light nuclei, very small nuclei, less than 30, so they can combine to form a bigger nuclei which has mass between 30 to 170. So again it will become stable. So these are the three ways in which the unstable nuclei can become stable. Now let's discuss about the mass defect and binding energy formula. So mass defect is quite simple, mathematical mass minus actual mass. So the mathematical mass was mass of proton into the number of proton. Z is the atomic number. We know that the atomic number is the number of proton. And mass of neutron into the number of neutrons, which can be obtained by mass number minus atomic number, because atomic number is number of proton and mass number is number of proton plus number of neutron. So when subtracting these two, protons will get cancelled, only neutron will remain. So this is the mathematical mass, and minus the actual mass. Let's say the actual mass is m. So this will give us the mass defect. And how can we find the binding energy? So binding energy is simple, mc square, that is mass defect into c square. So this will give us the binding energy in MeV. Mass defect was in U. Remember, 1 U can be directly converted into MeV. It is 931.5 MeV per over c square. Okay, this is the conversion between unified mass U and MeV. Now for example, let's say we have atom having mass number 20 and atomic number 10. So atomic number is 10, that means protons are 10, and if mass number is 20, then neutrons are 20 minus 10, that is 10. So it's quite understandable, 10 neutrons 10 protons make mass number 20. So what we have studied till now, nucleus is highly dense consisting of nucleons. Nucleus can be stable or unstable. If binding energy per nucleon is more, it is stable. If binding energy per nucleon is less, it is unstable. How can unstable nuclei become stable? By either releasing energy, by combining, or by breaking. And this formula is very important. So let's start with the fusion, then we will discuss about fission. So nuclear fusion. So when we have two smaller unstable nuclei and they combine to form a heavier nucleus, then we say that it is nuclear fusion. Again, you know why does this happen? Because some small nuclei are unstable. So in order to become stable, they can combine to form a bigger nuclei. So for example, deuterium is very unstable. If you look in the graph, deuterium, this deuterium is very less stable, okay, very less binding energy per nucleon. So this deuterium can be fused together to obtain a more stable element. So these deuterons can add up or fuse together to give us helium, okay, which is more stable than the deuterium atom. Obviously helium is not the most stable, but it is more stable than this. Further, helium will get fused into another heavier nuclei. So fusion is example, this example is there when deuterium combine to form helium. Remember what is deuterium? Deuterium is the isotope of hydrogen having 1 neutron and 1 proton. Okay, this is deuterium. So this is nuclear fusion. Now nuclear fusion is the most important process because it is the reason behind the energy of the stars How does the star obtain the energy or create the energy? They do nuclear fusion. So we know that the ultimate energy source is our sun, that is this our star. And for any solar system, any sun system, any planet in the universe, its star is very important because the star gives the energy. So the star obtains the energy by the process of nuclear fusion. So when the universe was made 13.82 billion years ago, around 1382 crore years ago, so initially electron, protons, neutrons were there, which were all uh, away from each other. But gradually, as the universe cooled down, electrons and protons came together and first hydrogen atom was formed, and gradually neutron also came in it and deuterium was obtained. So in the universe we have huge hydrogen clouds, a lot of hydrogen clouds. Now this cloud is compressed by the force of gravity. So when gravity compresses this cloud, then because of the compression, some energy is generated which helps us in fusing the deuterium atom into helium. And as soon as helium is obtained, then a neutron is released and a lot of energy is released. So in the process, nuclear fusion process, some of the mass is converted into, some of this mass is converted into energy, and this energy is released in the form of heat and light. So this nuclear fusion is started when the gravity compressed the hydrogen cloud. So we have two forces, gravity trying to compress the star, and fusion which is trying to blast the star. Okay, fusion release energy which will blast the star. So star has these two forces. So these two forces, when they are in balance, the star is stable, but when one of these forces are stronger, the star will either explode or it will compress. So sun is around 500 crore years old, and it is around it has around 500 crore more years to live. After that, the gravity will compress the star suddenly, and the star will die. In each second, sun converts around 600 million tons of hydrogen into helium, and a lot of energy is obtained. So the nuclear fusion is the main reason behind the energy of the stars. So stars obtain their energy because of the process of nuclear fusion. This energy is released in the form of EM waves, which are like infrared rays, red to violet visible rays, UV rays, etc. Now similarly, just like nuclear fusion, in nuclear fusion uh, we had the combination of two nuclei. In nuclear fusion, we will have a bigger nuclei which is unstable, which will break into smaller nuclei so that it can become more stable. And obviously this can further get divided, just like helium can further fuse, these elements can further divide and become more stable. So for example, the most common example of fusion is uranium 235 atom. So uranium 235 is unstable, and if neutron is collided with it, then it will break instantaneously, and it will break into barium and krypton, and 3 neutrons are also released in the process, and a lot of energy is released. A lot of energy is released when the nucleus of uranium atom breaks. So either it is fusion or fission. In both the processes, a lot of energy is released because some of the mass is converted into the energy. So uranium atom is huge. So why is it unstable? Because its size is huge. So as discussed, for longer distances, SNF or strong nuclear force is very weak. Strong nuclear force is not that effective. So uranium nucleus is very big. Because of that, the protons are able to repel each other, and the strong nuclear force is not able to hold them together for much long. So because of that, the uranium 235 or the bigger nuclei are unstable. because strong nuclear force is not able to apply sufficient force of attraction. Now there is this concept of chain reaction in nuclear fusion. So as discussed, why do we use neutron? Without even using neutron, uranium can break or split. But if you want to instantaneously at a particular moment want to break the uranium, just collide it with neutron, it will break. Okay, because it is unstable prior to in the beginning itself it is unstable, and if we nudge it just a little by a neutron, it will instantaneously break. So when we collide the neutron with uranium, it will break, but this process will generate 3 more neutrons as discussed. This process will generate 3 more neutrons. So these 3 more neutrons can collide with 3 uranium, and then again each process will generate 3 more neutrons, and then these neutrons will collide further with uranium and will generate further neutrons, and so on. So you can clearly see that a chain reaction is obtained, a reaction which is increasing exponentially. Okay, so this is the chain reaction. So chain reaction can be controlled or uncontrolled. So controlled chain reaction means that we stop the reaction after a certain time interval, and uncontrolled chain reaction is that we allow the reaction to happen for as long as the uranium atoms are there. So uncontrolled reaction is done when we need to blast something, for example atom bombs, nuclear bombs, and controlled reactions is done when we need to use the nuclear energy. For example, in nuclear power plants we generate the energy using controlled chain reaction. So atom bombs are also made up of nuclear fusion or fission process. Hydrogen bombs use fusion and uranium bombs use fission process. So when the neutrons collide with uranium, it explodes and a lot of energy is released. Now what is the nuclear power plant? So apart from atom bombs, nuclear energy has a major use in the form of nuclear power plant. We can produce a lot of energy using the fusion or fission and generate electricity. Now nuclear fusion is not done commercially, because in nuclear fusion we need to combine hydrogen atoms together to form helium, and usually they repel. So in order to combine them, a lot of energy is needed. Okay, in order to combine the hydrogen atoms, we first need to give them a lot of energy so that they can overcome the repulsive force between the electrons of their orbits, and they come close together. So in order to do fusion, we require a lot of energy in the beginning itself. So because of that, we do nuclear fission only, mostly. So in nuclear fusion reactor, we have fuel, which is uranium, then we have coolant, usually sodium or water, then moderator, which controls the speed of neutron, because if the speed of neutron is very high, it will just pass through uranium, and if it is very low, then it will not be able to make the uranium unstable and break it. So and control rods, which control the amount of neutron. So these are usually made up of graphite or cadmium. And ultimately what happens is that the heat from the uranium uranium atoms fission is given to water, which gets converted into steam, and this steam is given to turbine. Steam is with high speed is given to turbine, and turbine rotate to form electricity by the process of electromagnetic induction. So let's say this is the main core where the uranium is there. These are the control rods which control the amount and speed of neutrons. So the fusion will occur in this core. Energy will be released, so that energy will be carried by this coolant pipe. It will take out the energy and give off the energy to the water. Water will get converted to steam, and then that steam will rotate the turbine to produce electricity. So this is how nuclear power plants work. Now last part is the radioactivity. Radioactivity was observed in 1890s. Henry Becquerel, Marie Curie, Pierre Curie, all those people were the forefront scientists of the radioactivity. So what is radioactivity? So the scientists observed that there were some atoms which were emitting some light. Okay, they were glowing without any external light source. Okay, this is called fluorescence. So for example, radium is there which glows green, it is green in color. So when an atom emits some rays, light rays, like alpha, beta, gamma rays, and it glows, then this process is called radioactivity. Okay, so why does the atom emits alpha, beta or gamma rays? Because it is unstable, and by emitting those rays it is reducing its mass or energy. Okay, so alpha, beta and gamma rays, alpha rays are the positively charged rays, beta rays are the negatively charged particles, beta negative are negative and beta positive are positive, and gamma rays are electromagnetic waves which are neutral. Now alpha and beta rays will be deflected by electric and magnetic fields as they are charged up, and gamma rays will be undeflected. Apart from that, alpha rays affects the photographic plate and cause fluorescence. So all these three can do that. When they collide with fluorescent screen, then it will illuminate it. They produce strongest ionization, they produce very little ionization, and beta rays produce a bit of ionization. So what is ionization? It means that when alpha particles collide with the nucleus or atom, then it ionizes it. Either it becomes positive or it becomes negatively charged. Alpha particles have least penetrating power, it can be stopped by a sheet of paper. Beta particles have more penetrating power, and highest penetrating power is with the gamma rays because it is the most energetic rays. Uh, Alpha particles have big mass and charge, beta particles have small mass and charge, and gamma rays have no mass and no charge. And it can travel around 2-4 centimeters, it can travel around 2-3 meters, and it can travel up to 500 meter in usual material. Alpha particles are, by the way, nucleus of helium atom, so it has 2 positive charge. Beta particle has 1 negative charge, and gamma rays are neutral. So alpha particles remember are helium nuclei. Because of them it has 2 protons and 2 neutrons. So the mass is 4u and the charge is +2. Remember this thing. And alpha particles strongly ionize because they are charged particles. Now beta particles are also of 2 types, beta negative, which is we are discussing, that is negative, and there is also beta positive, which is positive in charge, but this is not proton, it is positron. So there is another particle called positron which is positive in charge, but it is just the counter image of electron. It has same mass as that of electron, but its charge is opposite to that of electron, it is positive. It is not proton, remember, because the mass of proton is high. It is electron's positive version, so positron. So when alpha decay occurs, so in alpha decay, as discussed, 4 mass number and 2 protons, that is 2 atomic number, will get changed. So the mass number of the atom will reduce by 4 and the atomic number will reduce by 2. In beta decay, how does beta decay happen? It is very interesting because in nucleus there is no electron negative charge. So what happens is that the neutron splits into proton and electron, and because of that this electron is emitted in the form of beta rays. So for example, let's say we have this situation, 10 neutron 10 proton, and one of the neutron get converted into proton and electron, so the protons will become 11 now. So what is happening is that the mass number will remain same because at the place of neutron proton has come, so mass number will not change, but protons has increased, number of protons has increased, so the atomic number will increase by 1. So atomic number has increased by 1 and this electron is released. And in beta positive decay, the proton splits into electron and neutron, so again the atomic number will remain same, but the mass number will reduce this time because protons are reduced, so the mass number will reduce. So Z minus 1, and the positive beta particles will decay, or they will go outside. And gamma emission, so gamma emission is simple, there will be no change in mass number and atomic number, only energy will be released. This nucleus will be in lower energy state. So what is radioactivity? Alpha beta emission, alpha beta gamma emission, because of the unstable atom. This emission is random, we cannot precisely tell that yeah, at this particular time this atom will decay or this atom will emit some alpha beta gamma rays, but uh, we can predict the statistical uh, radioactivity. That is, we can let's say we have a sample containing 1000 atoms, so we can predict that yeah, in this 1000 atoms 500 atoms will decay in, let's say, 1 hour. So we cannot pinpoint that this atom itself will decay, but we can say that out of this 1000 atoms this 500 will decay. So it is a statistical phenomena, radioactivity is a statistical phenomena. So we cannot precisely predict that when will this one uranium atom will decay, but we can predict in out of 1000 uranium atoms, let's say 500 will decay in, let's say, 1 crore year. Okay, so we can tell that. Now half life is there. Half life is the time in which half of the atoms in a given sample decay. Okay, so let's say we have 1000 atoms. So what is half life? So let's say in 1000 years 500 atoms decay, so the half life will be 1000 years. So half life of carbon 14 is around 500 years, and half life of uranium 235 is around 3 to 4 billion years. Now let's discuss a few formulas. So this is the rate of decay. So rate of decay depends on the initial number of atoms. So more the atoms, more will be the decay. It's quite simple. For example, if you have 1 lakh carbon 14 atom, if you have 100 carbon 14 atoms, so in 5000 years half will decay, so that is 50,000 will decay here. Only 50 will decay here. So more the particles, more will be the decay. So rate of decay depends on the number of particles or neutrons, nucleus. So when proportionality is removed, equal to comes, then a constant comes. This constant is called decay constant. Negative sign indicates that the as the decay is happening, the number of particles is reducing, and which is reducing the decay rate. This can be put in this formula also, okay, in terms of exponential. Now half life formula is natural log 2 over lambda decay constant. Natural log's value is 0.693. Natural log 2 is having 0.693. So you can directly remember this formula, 0.693 over lambda. So these are the few formulas. If you need to find half life, use this. If you need to find a number of nuclei after time to, use this formula. Decay constant can be found out by these formulas. So this is radioactivity.